Wounded and hunted, she begged the rancher, "Let me stay, I'll repay you." The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, but it offered no comfort to the woman staggering across the barren plains. Her body ached in a way that made every step feel like climbing a mountain. Her clothes were ripped in several places, revealing bruises that told a story of the struggle she had endured. Dust clung to her skin and hair, making her look like she had been living in the wilderness for days. Sweat ran down her face, mixing with the dirt and tears she could no longer hold back. She stumbled again, clutching her ankle, which throbbed with a pain that threatened to knock her to the ground. She had been running for what felt like forever. Every sound made her heart leap: the snap of a twig, the rustle of dry grass, the distant caw of a crow. She did not dare look back, though she knew danger trailed her closely. In her small town, a series of unfortunate events had turned into something much darker than she could have imagined. A disagreement had spiraled out of control, and soon, threats had started to follow her. People she thought she could trust had shown their true colors, and now she was alone, completely alone. Her legs were heavy, and she felt like her strength was leaving her piece by piece, yet she pressed on because giving up was not an option. She remembered the words of an old neighbor: "If you run, don't stop until you find a place that can't be reached by those chasing you." She had clung to that advice like a lifeline. The thought of a safe place kept her moving, even when her body screamed for rest. Her throat was dry, and she had long since finished the little water she had brought with her. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in more than a day. Hunger and fear mixed into a heavy, choking weight she carried with her every step. In the distance, through the shimmering heat, she saw what looked like a ranch. Fences stretched across the land, and a barn stood tall, its red paint faded but still visible in the dying light. For the first time in hours, hope flickered in her chest. The sight of human habitation meant she might not have to keep running forever. She forced herself to walk faster, ignoring the pain that shot through her ankle with each step. She didn't know who lived there or if they would even let her stay, but the chance of safety, even for a little while, was enough to drive her forward. As she approached, she noticed signs of life: a horse grazing lazily near the fence, a few birds settling on the roof of the barn. It was not the bustling town she had fled, but in this quiet place there was a promise of shelter. Her chest heaved as she neared the fence. Every part of her screamed to collapse, to give in to exhaustion, but she pushed herself to her knees and began to call out. Her voice was weak, trembling, but desperate. "Please, anyone, help me." A man appeared on the porch of the main house. He was tall, with a broad frame and weathered features that spoke of years working under the sun. His hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon with caution. When he saw her, his brow furrowed. Strangers did not simply wander into his land, especially a young woman appearing out of nowhere, disheveled and frightened. He took a cautious step forward, unsure of what he was seeing. The woman collapsed near the fence, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. Tears spilled down her face, mixing with the dust and sweat. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw and only a weak, broken plea came out. "Please, let me stay. I'll repay you, I swear." She didn't know why she said it or if it would even matter. All she knew was that she could not continue running. She could not face another night hiding in the open, vulnerable to whoever was pursuing her. She needed safety, and she needed it now. The rancher watched her carefully. He had seen people in distress before, but there was something different about her. It wasn't just her appearance or the obvious injuries. It was the raw, desperate honesty in her eyes. She was not trying to manipulate him, nor was she hiding anything behind false bravado. Every inch of her told the story of someone who had endured more than most could imagine. His first instinct was to be cautious. There was a part of him that wanted to keep the fence closed, to turn away and continue with his life. But the sight of her, kneeling in the dust, shaking and pleading, stirred something he could not ignore. Slowly, he walked down the steps of the porch, his boots crunching against the dry ground. He stopped a few feet away, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm but not unkind. "Where are you coming from?" The woman looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of fear but also an unspoken trust, the kind that forms in moments of extreme vulnerability. I had no choice," she whispered. "I had to leave. Please, I don't have anywhere else to go. I can work, I can anything. Just let me stay until I can figure out what to do." Her voice cracked and she buried her face in her hands for a moment, overwhelmed by relief that someone was finally listening. The rancher studied her carefully. He could see the truth in her desperation. She was tired, she was scared, and she needed help. And he had the ability to give her that help. But he also knew that offering shelter came with risk. He had to trust his instincts. He had to decide whether to let compassion guide him or to let caution win. In the end, the sight of her, so fragile and human, tipped the balance. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Come with me. We'll see what we can do." She looked up at him in disbelief, hope flooding through her. She tried to speak, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded, a small, grateful smile breaking through her tear-streaked face. With his help, she got to her feet, her legs weak but steadying. Every step she took toward the house was like stepping out of darkness and into light. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she believed she might survive this night. Inside the house, he gave her water and something to eat. The woman drank greedily, savoring each drop as though it were gold. Her hands shook as she ate, but she could feel strength slowly returning to her body. She was still terrified. She knew danger could come for her at any moment. But for the first time, she had a chance to rest without constantly looking over her shoulder. As she settled in, the rancher gave her clean clothes and a place to wash. The small, simple home was quiet, but the quiet was comforting, a stark contrast to the constant threat she had been running from. She cleaned the dirt and blood from her skin, her hands still trembling, and caught her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself, haggard, bruised, but alive. And for the first time in days, she felt the possibility of hope. That night, she lay on the small cot in the corner of the room, exhausted beyond measure. Her mind replayed everything that had led her here, the mistakes, the threats, the running, but she clung to one simple truth: she had survived. She had found someone willing to help her, and that meant she had a chance to begin again. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and the faint promise of safety. And for the first time since her flight had begun, she allowed herself to close her eyes and imagine a future where fear did not rule her life. The next morning, the rancher woke before dawn, as he always did. The sun had not yet risen, and the ranch was quiet except for the occasional sound of a rooster crowing or the low neigh of a horse. He walked to the kitchen and started the morning chores in silence, his mind half on the work, half on the woman who had appeared at his fence the day before. She was still asleep in the small guest room he had set up for her, exhausted from her long flight and the injuries she carried. Her breathing was steady, but the rancher knew that rest alone would not heal the fear in her heart. When she finally woke, the sunlight filtered softly through the curtains and she blinked, adjusting to the brightness. The aches in her body reminded her of the pain she had endured, but there was also a sense of relief. She was alive. She was safe, at least for now. Tentatively, she stepped out of the room, dressed in the clean clothes the rancher had provided, and found him in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread filled the air, simple comforts she had not experienced in weeks. The rancher did not speak immediately. He continued with his routine, checking the tools, ensuring the animals were fed, and making a mental list of tasks for the day. He moved with efficiency, a rhythm he had perfected over years on the ranch. Finally, he looked up and gestured for her to sit. "You must be hungry," he said, his voice calm but direct. She nodded and quietly took a seat, feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and gratitude. Over breakfast, the woman tried to find the right words to explain herself. She did not want to burden him with every detail, but she knew he needed to understand at least a part of her situation. I don't want to trouble you," she said softly, her hands wrapped around the cup to keep them from shaking. "I've had to leave everything behind. I didn't know where else to go, and I just needed a safe place to stay for a little while." Her voice wavered, and she struggled to hold back tears. The rancher listened, nodding slightly but saying nothing. He had learned over the years that sometimes the best way to help someone was to let them speak, to allow them to release the fear and tension that had built up inside. He could see her sincerity, the raw honesty that could not be faked. She was not asking for charity out of laziness or manipulation. She was asking for survival, for a chance to breathe without fear for a few hours. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "You can stay," he said, "but this isn't a place for idleness. You'll help around the ranch. We all have work to do here, and it keeps life moving, keeps people busy and safe." She looked at him, surprised at the practicality in his words. It wasn't just permission, it was a condition, a structure she hadn't expected. She swallowed nervously but nodded. "I understand," she said. "I'll do whatever you need me to." The morning passed with careful observation. The rancher showed her how to feed the chickens and gather eggs, explaining the routines of the ranch as he went. She followed his instructions closely, moving cautiously at first, unsure of her balance and strength after days of running and hiding. Her hands were rough from lack of care and injuries, but she worked diligently, not wanting to fail the man who had given her a chance. Each small task, from mending a fence to helping carry hay bales, became a test of both her body and her determination. He watched her silently, impressed by her perseverance. She was tired, yes, but she was not defeated. There was a quiet resilience in the way she moved, a determination that reminded him of his younger days when he had worked from dawn to dusk to keep the ranch running. Though she was not from this life, she was learning quickly, her hands finding ways to perform tasks she had never done before. The rancher began to feel a cautious admiration for her strength. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she took a short break by the barn, sitting on an old wooden crate. Her mind wandered back to the events that had brought her here. She remembered the fear, the constant running, and the hopeless feeling of being chased. Each memory was painful, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the work in front of her. She realized that survival was not just about running away. It was about learning to stand, to take small steps toward a safer future. The rancher approached her, carrying a bucket of water. He handed it to her without speaking, and she took it gratefully, splashing water on her face to refresh herself. "You'll need more than water to heal," he said, his tone softening slightly. "You need time and you need routine. That's why I have you helping. Work gives your mind something to focus on besides fear." She nodded, understanding more than he could know. She had been living in constant fear for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to focus on something ordinary, to have a task that was just for survival, not for escape. By midday, the rancher decided to take her on a short walk around the property. The ranch was large, with rolling fields, a few barns, and a small pond. As they walked, he pointed out landmarks, explaining which areas were safe and which required caution. He also told her stories about his own life, the struggles he had faced, and the lessons he had learned on the ranch. She listened closely, finding comfort in the normalcy of his words. It was a strange feeling, listening to someone who had no immediate danger following him, someone who spoke of routine struggles rather than life-or-death chases. In the late afternoon, clouds began to gather on the horizon, signaling a coming storm. The rancher moved quickly, preparing the animals and securing the barns. She followed his lead, helping as best as she could. The storm would be difficult to face, but for the first time, she did not feel helpless. She had someone guiding her, someone experienced who could protect her while she learned to help herself. Each action, each small task, reinforced the fragile sense of control she was beginning to regain. As evening approached, they worked side by side to bring in the last of the animals. The sky turned a deep shade of gray, and the first drops of rain began to fall. She shivered, not just from the chill, but from the awareness that danger was always lingering somewhere in the background. Yet, despite the fear, she felt a strange sense of belonging, a connection to a place she had never known before. The ranch, with its simple routines and steady rhythm, was becoming a sanctuary. After the chores were done, they returned to the house. She was exhausted, but not in the same paralyzing way as before. She was tired from effort, from learning, from participating in life rather than fleeing it. Dinner was simple but warm and filling, and as they ate, conversation flowed more easily. He asked her about herself, not probing too deeply, but enough to let her tell small pieces of her story. Each word she spoke was met with quiet understanding, not judgment, and she began to feel the beginnings of trust. Night fell, and the storm arrived in full force. Rain pounded on the roof, wind howled through the trees, and the animals settled quietly in their stalls. She lay in the small bed the rancher had prepared for her, listening to the storm and feeling a strange sense of security. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that she could survive this night, that the fear could be managed, if not completely erased. In that quiet moment, she understood something profound. Survival was not just about running or hiding. It was about finding someone who would see you as human, not just as prey or problem. The rancher had given her that gift, an opportunity to rest, to work, to begin again. And in return, she had made a promise, not just to him but to herself, to repay that kindness in every way she could. As sleep took her, she dreamed of simple things: a place to stay, a safe bed, a chance to recover. She did not yet know the challenges that lay ahead, the moments of fear that would return, or the trials that would test her trust and courage. But she knew that for the first time, she had a chance, a real chance, to reclaim her life. And that hope, fragile as it was enough to keep her moving forward. Days passed on the ranch, each blending into the next with the rhythm of chores, animal care, and the quiet routines of life. For the woman, each day was a test, not just of her body but of her mind. She was learning that survival did not always mean running. Sometimes, it meant learning to stand still, to observe, to work, and to trust. She rose early, followed the rancher's instructions, and slowly began to take pride in the small accomplishments of each day. Feeding the animals, gathering eggs, mending fences, these tasks, once foreign and difficult, were becoming manageable. Each success, however small, reminded her that she could do more than simply flee. The rancher observed her closely, noting how her movements were becoming more confident and deliberate. Her face, once pale and streaked with dirt, was slowly regaining color, and there was a spark of life in her eyes that had been absent when she first arrived. He did not press her to talk about her past, but over time, she shared fragments of her story. She spoke of the threats that had forced her to leave her town, the fear that had driven her into the wilderness, and the moments of desperation when she thought she might not survive. She did not dwell on the pain, but he could see it in her eyes, in the way her hands trembled when she remembered certain nights. For the first time, she felt a measure of safety. The ranch, with its steady routines and open spaces, was unlike anywhere she had been in months. Here, the rules were simple: work, help, and be honest. There were no sudden threats, no deceitful smiles hiding danger, no footsteps in the dark that made her heart race. She began to sleep more soundly, waking in the mornings without the overwhelming dread that had haunted her in the past. Yet, beneath this fragile calm, she knew that her troubles had not disappeared. The people chasing her were still out there, and though she could not see them, she felt their presence like a shadow hovering at the edges of her mind. One afternoon, as she worked near the barn, the wind shifted and carried a sound that froze her blood. A vehicle engine, low and deliberate, approaching the property. Her heart hammered against her ribs and she froze, trying to decide if she had imagined it. But the sound grew louder, unmistakable, and she realized that her past had found her. She ran to the rancher, her voice shaking as she gasped, They're here. They've come for me." The rancher's expression hardened, his calm demeanor replaced by a quiet, controlled alertness. He did not panic. Panic did not solve anything on a ranch, especially not when danger approached. "Stay here," he said firmly. "I'll handle this." She wanted to argue, to insist that she could run, but she knew the truth. She could not escape them this time. She had no energy, no safe place to hide, and no plan. The only chance she had was the man who had taken her in and given her a reason to fight, even if only a small one. From the porch, he watched as two figures emerged from the shadows near the fence line. They were rough-looking, their eyes scanning the property with suspicion and intent. They did not yet see the woman, but their presence was enough to trigger the memories she had tried so hard to suppress. The night spent running, the terror of being cornered, the helplessness that had driven her across the plains. She gripped the edge of the porch railing, trying to steady herself as the rancher stepped forward, his posture commanding and unafraid. The intruders called out, demanding that she come to them. The rancher's voice cut through the air, firm and unwavering. "She's not going anywhere. Leave or you'll answer to me." There was no hesitation in his words, no room for negotiation. The woman watched, heart pounding, as the rancher took a position between her and the approaching danger, his hands steady and ready. It was the first time she truly understood the meaning of protection, not just the absence of harm, but the presence of someone willing to fight for you. The men paused, sizing up the situation. They had expected an easy confrontation, but instead, they were met with a quiet strength that they did not anticipate. The rancher did not raise his voice beyond necessity, nor did he make threats he could not back up. His eyes, steady and unflinching, conveyed a message they could not ignore. This was not a person to be underestimated. Slowly, they realized that taking her by force would be more complicated than they had planned. Tension hung in the air like a heavy fog, and after a long, silent moment, the men backed away, muttering threats under their breath but choosing to leave for now. The woman collapsed onto the porch, trembling not from fear alone, but from the overwhelming relief that she was still safe. The rancher crouched beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're all right," he said simply. "I've got you." For the first time in weeks, she believed it. The words were small, but they carried a weight far greater than any promises made by those who had pursued her. They carried a certainty that someone had her back, that she was no longer facing the world alone. The days that followed were quiet but filled with new lessons. The woman learned how to maintain vigilance without living in constant fear, how to notice subtle changes in her surroundings, and how to act with purpose even when danger was near. The rancher guided her patiently, teaching her the importance of observation, preparation, and quick thinking. She practiced responding to potential threats, learning to move with confidence and not panic when confronted with the unknown. Each exercise, each small victory, bolstered her courage and began to replace the paralyzing fear that had dominated her life. She also continued to work diligently on the ranch. Feeding the animals, tending the fields, and repairing fences became not just chores, but exercises in focus and resilience. Every task completed was a small triumph over her past, a reminder that she could contribute, that she could be more than a victim of circumstance. The rancher watched her quietly, offering guidance but allowing her to find her own strength. He never pressured her to reveal everything about her past, knowing that trust and safety had to come before full disclosure. At night, they would sit by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames a stark contrast to the cold fears that had haunted her. The rancher spoke of his life, the hardships and rewards of ranch work, and the lessons learned from years of experience. She listened attentively, absorbing both his words and his calm presence. It was a new kind of education, one not found in schools or books, but in the quiet moments of trust and shared effort. Each story, each small lesson, reinforced the sense that she could survive, not by fleeing, but by standing her ground with support. Over time, the bond between them grew stronger. She began to understand that the rancher was not just a protector, but a mentor and, in some ways, a friend. He treated her with respect, not pity, and held her accountable in a way that encouraged growth rather than fear. She discovered that she could laugh again, even if only softly at first, and that she could find satisfaction in simple achievements: a fixed fence, a fed animal, a task completed well. Slowly, the heavy weight of fear began to lift, replaced by cautious confidence. Yet, despite the growing peace, she remained aware that her past could return at any moment. The brief encounter with the men at the fence had reminded her that danger was not gone. It had only been delayed. She carried this awareness not as a burden, but as a lesson in vigilance and preparedness. The rancher's guidance allowed her to transform that fear into practical action, learning how to protect herself, how to anticipate danger, and how to act decisively when necessary. By the end of the week, she could see the difference in herself. Her body was stronger, her mind clearer, and her spirit more resilient. She no longer flinched at every sound, nor did she collapse in despair when faced with challenges. She had survived the immediate threat and had learned that there were people and places in the world that offered protection without judgment. And though the memory of her past still lingered, it no longer controlled her. She had found a way to face the world with cautious optimism, armed with the knowledge that she could endure and the support of someone who believed in her. Life on the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, but for the woman, every day still carried lessons and challenges. She was no longer the frightened person who had stumbled through the plains weeks before. Each sunrise brought not just chores, but a chance to prove to herself that she could thrive, not merely survive. She rose early, as the rancher had taught her, the cold morning air filling her lungs and reminding her that each day was a gift. Though her muscles ached and her body often felt heavy, she greeted the day with determination. She had learned that strength was not just physical, it came from persistence, patience, and the courage to face each new challenge. The rancher watched her carefully as she moved through the tasks he assigned. Her confidence was growing, though she sometimes still hesitated, unsure if she was doing things the right way. He never scolded her. Instead, he guided her patiently, showing her better methods and letting her practice until she could perform them confidently. She learned to feed the animals efficiently, to tend the gardens without damaging the plants, and to repair fences with precision. Each small success built her confidence further, proving to her that she could handle more than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, while carrying water to the horses, she noticed a section of the fence that had been weakened by recent storms. She hesitated, unsure if she could fix it correctly. The rancher approached quietly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can do it," he said. "Take it one step at a time." His words were simple, but they carried reassurance that she had not felt in months. She worked carefully, following his instructions, and soon the fence was secure. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. For the first time, she realized that she was not just surviving on the ranch, she was contributing, becoming part of something larger than herself. As the days passed, her bond with the rancher grew deeper. They shared small conversations over meals, discussing everyday life and the work that needed to be done. She learned about his past, how he had inherited the ranch from his father, and the challenges he had faced keeping it running through droughts, storms, and financial struggles. Listening to him, she began to understand that hardship was not unique to her life. Everyone faced challenges, and strength often came not from avoiding them but from facing them head-on. Her past, however, was never far from her mind. She remained vigilant, aware that the people who had chased her were still out there. Every sound beyond the fence made her heart race, and some nights she woke from dreams that felt all too real, imagining shadows lurking in the corners of the ranch. The rancher noticed her unease, though he never pried. Instead, he taught her practical ways to stay safe, how to secure doors, how to notice subtle changes in her surroundings, and how to remain calm under pressure. These lessons were invaluable, and she began to feel a sense of control she had never known while constantly fleeing her past. One day, a harsh wind swept across the fields, signaling the approach of another storm. The clouds darkened rapidly, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. She and the rancher worked together to bring in the animals, securing the barn doors and covering the feed. She moved with skill and precision, no longer afraid of the storm or the work it required. The rancher observed her with quiet pride, noting how far she had come since the day she had arrived, trembling and exhausted at his fence. She had grown stronger, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. After the storm passed, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun break through the clouds and illuminate the wet fields. The air was filled with the fresh scent of rain and earth. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. For a moment, the memories of fear and running faded, replaced by the reality of her current life, a life where she had safety, purpose, and support. It was a feeling so foreign yet so welcome that it brought tears to her eyes. The rancher handed her a towel, his expression gentle but knowing, and she wiped her face, smiling faintly. Weeks turned into months, and the woman's confidence continued to grow. She no longer hesitated when tasks were assigned, and she began to take initiative, noticing problems and finding solutions before being asked. She repaired fences on her own, helped feed the animals without instruction, and even began teaching herself small skills that the rancher had not yet shown her. It was a transformation that surprised even her. The fear that had once consumed her life was still a quiet presence, but it no longer dictated her every action. She had learned to live with it, to face it, and to move forward despite it. During this time, her trust in the rancher deepened. She realized that he had never forced her to reveal her past, never judged her for the circumstances that had brought her to the ranch. His kindness was steady, unwavering, and free from expectation. It was a lesson she had never received before, that people could be good, and that trust could be earned, nurtured, and honored. She felt a growing sense of loyalty, a desire to repay him not just for his help, but for the belief he had shown in her ability to overcome her fear and rebuild her life. One evening, as they sat by the fire after completing the day's work, the woman reflected on how far she had come. The ranch had become more than a shelter, it had become a home. She had learned the rhythm of life here, the satisfaction of hard work, and the security of knowing someone had her back. She realized that while her past would always be a part of her, it no longer had power over her future. She could look ahead with hope and determination, knowing that she had the strength and support to face whatever challenges came next. The rancher spoke quietly that night, telling her stories of the land, of the seasons, and of the many challenges he had faced over the years. She listened intently, absorbing not just his words but the calm assurance behind them. It was a reminder that life was full of obstacles, but with patience, perseverance, and support, those obstacles could be overcome. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned, the trust she had earned, and the place she now called home. In the days that followed, her role on the ranch became more important. She no longer needed constant guidance, and the rancher began to rely on her for assistance with more complex tasks. Together, they managed the animals, maintained the property, and ensured that the ranch remained a safe and productive environment. She had transformed from a frightened, fleeing woman into a capable, confident partner in the daily life of the ranch. The growth she experienced was not just physical, but emotional and mental as well, giving her a sense of purpose she had never known before. Yet the woman never forgot the lessons of vigilance. Though life had become steadier, she remained aware of the world beyond the ranch fences, knowing that danger could still return. But now, she faced that awareness with confidence rather than panic. She knew how to protect herself, how to read subtle signs of threat, and most importantly, that she was not alone. The bond she had formed with the rancher provided a foundation of strength that she could draw upon in moments of fear. By the end of this period, she had fully earned her place on the ranch. She was no longer just a guest or a survivor. She was an integral part of the daily life and work of the ranch. Her contributions were valued, her efforts recognized, and her presence a source of quiet inspiration. The rancher looked at her with a mix of pride and respect, knowing that she had not only survived her past, but had grown stronger because of it. She had proven that resilience, determination, and trust could transform fear into strength. In these quiet moments of reflection, she understood something profound. Life was unpredictable and challenges were inevitable, but strength could be found in connection, trust, and perseverance. She had been given a second chance, and she had seized it with both hands. The ranch, once simply a place of refuge, had become a school, a sanctuary, and a home. And though the road ahead would still hold obstacles, she now faced it with courage, confidence, and the knowledge that she could endure and thrive. By the time spring arrived, the ranch had transformed not only under the care of the woman and the rancher, but also in the way she had transformed herself. The fields, once dry and patchy, were green and full of life. The animals were healthy and thriving. And more importantly, the woman herself had become strong, confident, and capable, a stark contrast to the trembling, exhausted figure who had first stumbled across the plains months ago. She had earned her place here, not just through work, but through resilience, determination, and the steady growth of trust. One bright morning, as the sun painted the sky in golden hues, she walked through the fields carrying fresh hay for the horses. Her steps were purposeful, her movements precise. She no longer feared each sound or sudden movement because she had learned to assess, anticipate, and act. The rancher followed her quietly, observing her from a distance, a faint smile on his face. He had watched her struggle, recover, and grow stronger, and he knew that she was no longer a person defined by fear. She had become a symbol of perseverance, of the human ability to rebuild even after the darkest trials. That day she paused near the barn, brushing hay from her hands. She looked around the ranch, taking in the fences, the fields, and the animals that had come to depend on her care. It struck her how far she had come, from fleeing across a barren plain, hunted and wounded, to standing here, strong and capable, in a place that had become her home. She felt a quiet pride but also gratitude. She had been given a chance when she had nothing, and she had honored that chance through effort, honesty, and perseverance. Later that afternoon, as they worked together to repair a section of fence, she began to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The memories of running, of fear, of desperation, still lingered at the edges of her mind. But they no longer controlled her. She could recall them without panic, understanding that they were part of her story but not the defining part. She had faced danger, survived, and had learned how to protect herself and find support in someone trustworthy. These lessons had reshaped her sense of self and her understanding of the world. The rancher watched her carefully, noting her determination and growth. He had taught her not only the practical skills of ranch life, but also lessons of resilience, trust, and quiet strength. She had absorbed these lessons, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to survive, to thrive, and to repay the kindness that had been shown to her. Over time, he had come to trust her completely, confident that she would handle any challenge with calmness and intelligence. The bond between them was no longer simply one of protector and protected. It was a partnership built on respect, trust, and shared experience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ranch in warm orange light, she stood by the porch watching the sky. The air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and the soft sounds of animals settling for the night. She thought about the past months, the fear, the uncertainty, the moments when she had doubted whether she could continue. And she thought about the present, the safety, the routine, the knowledge that she was capable of handling challenges. A sense of peace settled over her, a feeling she had not experienced in years. Her thoughts were interrupted when the rancher approached, carrying a small lantern. He placed it beside her and said quietly, "You've done well." "More than I expected." She smiled faintly, feeling warmth at his words. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied honestly. You saved me when I had nowhere else to go." He nodded, acknowledging her gratitude but not dwelling on it. There was no need. Actions, not words, had shown the truth of her journey. In the following weeks, she continued to thrive. She began to take on responsibilities independently, checking fences, feeding animals, and preparing the fields without constant supervision. The rancher encouraged her to trust her instincts, reminding her that mistakes were part of learning, and that confidence came from experience, not perfection. She grew more self-assured with each task completed, each problem solved, and each day lived fully. The fear that had once dominated her life became a quiet memory, a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. The ultimate test of her transformation came unexpectedly one afternoon. A messenger arrived from the town she had fled, carrying news of unresolved matters and lingering threats. Though the details were stressful, she faced the situation with calmness and intelligence she had not possessed before. She consulted with the rancher, planned her steps carefully, and addressed the issue with clarity and courage. When the matter was resolved without confrontation or harm, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She realized that she no longer needed to live in constant fear. She could face the world with confidence, using the skills and wisdom she had gained during her time on the ranch. As months turned into a year, the woman and the rancher built a life together on the property. They worked side by side, managing the land, caring for the animals, and maintaining the ranch with diligence and care. Their bond deepened, rooted in shared effort, respect, and understanding. The woman no longer saw herself as a visitor or a temporary guest. She was a vital part of the ranch, contributing in meaningful ways and earning the trust and admiration of the rancher and anyone who came to know them. One quiet evening, after the animals were fed and the chores completed, she sat by the porch, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the days of fear, the endless running, and the despair that had once threatened to consume her. And she thought about the present, the safety, the purpose, and the sense of belonging she now felt. The ranch had given her more than shelter. It had given her a chance to rebuild her life, to regain her confidence, and to find meaning in hard work and honest effort. The rancher joined her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. They watched the sun sink below the horizon in comfortable silence, a sense of peace and fulfillment surrounding them. She realized that the journey that had begun in fear and desperation had led her to something she could never have imagined: safety, trust, and a place to call home. She had faced the darkest moments of her life and emerged stronger, wiser, and capable of creating her own future. In the days that followed, she continued to thrive, embracing each new challenge with determination and resilience. She learned that life was unpredictable and that obstacles would always appear, but she had the tools, the experience, and the support to face them. The rancher remained by her side, guiding when needed, but trusting her to act independently. Their partnership flourished, based on respect, loyalty, and shared experience, proving that trust and kindness could transform lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Eventually, the woman understood that her past, though still a part of her, no longer defined her. She had learned that survival was not about running endlessly, but about finding strength within herself and in those willing to support her. The ranch had become a symbol of that transformation, a place where fear had been replaced by courage, despair by hope, and uncertainty by purpose. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with confidence, resilience, and the quiet knowledge that she had already overcome more than she had ever imagined possible. As the sun set on another day, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the woman stood at the edge of the fields, watching the animals settle for the night. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, a quiet joy in the knowledge that she had survived, grown stronger, and found a place where she truly belonged. The ranch, once a refuge, had become her home, and the rancher, once simply a protector, had become a trusted friend and partner. Together, they had built a life grounded in hard work, trust, and the belief that even the most wounded and hunted could find safety, strength, and freedom.